Today, the Associated Press released their preseason top 25. But before I react to this, because this is what it's going to be about, it's going to be my reaction to the top 25. I'm going to give my opinions on it. Before, let me just, since the college football season is coming up, and it's right around the corner, I'm thinking about here's what my plan's going to be. I am thinking on Mondays, I do the prediction for that upcoming week. Then maybe Saturday night after the football is all finished, maybe doing like a week reaction. But it's gonna be an exception. Like Monday, because it's on Labor Day weekend when it starts, and there's always a game on Labor Day. So I'm thinking, wait until like that Monday night after that game is over to do like my week 1 reaction. Simply because it just wouldn't really make sense to do a week reaction without all the games not being done. So that's kind of what my plan was going to be. But anything else, just finish it right when that week is. Anyway, let's get to this preseason top 25. No surprise here. Number 1, Alabama. I mean, that comes to nobody's surprise. Coming off a national championship loss to Clemson on the last play of the game. So Alabama's going to be out for blood this year. I mean, I'll even be surprised they lose one game. At least at this point. But the match against Florida State could be a little bit tough. But if history shows it, Alabama should come out on top. Really overwhelmingly, to tell you the truth. I mean, I'm thinking whatever the point spread is in that game, bet the over. That's how dominant Alabama has been historically in the opener of the season. Number 2, the Ohio State Buckeyes. Now, this doesn't really come as a surprise either. Despite Ohio State having the most inexperienced team in all of college football last year, they were able to overcome that inexperience challenge and make it all the way to the college football playoff. But they are really coming off a 31-0 humiliation against Clemson in the Fiesta Bowl last New Year's Eve. So that's going to be the question around Ohio State's mind, is how are they going to come out after the way their season ended? Really, it ended abruptly short. Number 3, the Florida State Seminoles. Now, college football is already going to have an exciting start. Alabama taking on Florida State in the first Saturday night game of the season. The biggest primetime game of the season is going to be on week 1. That's when you know that you're being gifted with great college football to start the year. Number 4, USC. Now, this is going to be an unpopular opinion of mine, but I am just not buying into USC this year. I know they have a Heisman hopeful in Sam Darnold, who's probably going to be the second quarterback taken behind Josh Allen of Wyoming in the 2018 NFL Draft. But the problem I have with USC, it's the same problem I have with Tennessee. Just when we think they're back, we overhype them. In fact, USC is the Tennessee of the Pac-12. Whenever we think they're back, they just overestimate us. Or we overestimate them. Honestly, I'll be shocked if USC makes the college football playoff. Because USC's got a really tough schedule this year, including Texas in week 3 with new head coach Tom Herman. Now that could be a test for the Trojans, but we will cross that bridge when we get to it. Number 5, the Clemson Tigers. Now the Tigers are coming off the national championship. They lost their leadership in Deshaun Watson, but they still have a pretty solid defensive line. In fact, they'll probably still feature the best, one of if not the best defensive line in all of college football. honestly, I would put Clemson ahead of USC in this. I know USC has a quarterback, there's the QB coming back, and Clemson doesn't. But I don't think it matters who starts the quarterback for Clemson, whether it's going to be Kelly Bryant, Hunter Johnson, or Zarek Cooper. I think whichever guy is going to be the quarterback, I think they're going to be just fine. I mean, they'll have the defensive support because Clemson's probably going to have the best defense in the ACC for sure. Only ahead of Florida State by a small margin. But if you put the Clemson defensive line and Florida State defensive line, I would say Clemson's is a little bit better because they've got experience. They've played some big games. Florida State's has not. Number 6, the Penn State Nittany Lions. Now, Penn State would be a pretty solid bet to maybe be a surprise team again this year. But the question is, was this just a one-hit wonder? Or are they going to repeat with this really dominant team that they're supposed to be bringing in, with 10 returning offensive stars, including 2 Heisman hopefuls in Trace McSorley and Saquon Barkley. So all eyes are going to be on Penn State in the Big Ten, whether if Penn State is for real as they say they are, or if that was just an outlier season. We're going to know for sure when they go on the road at Ohio State in October. I think that might be the game that determines whether Penn State is in or out of the College Football Playoff. See, already we're naming all these games that are going to have major college football playoff implications. Number 7, the Oklahoma Sooners. Now, the Oklahoma Sooners didn't start off that well last year. In fact, including double-digit losses to Houston and Ohio State. But the Sooners seem to have got stronger every week after that 1-2 start. And they have a Heisman hopeful as well in Baker Mayfield, who's returning for his senior year. But Oklahoma has to go on the road to Ohio State in week 3. That's another game that's going to probably have major college football playoff implications. Number 8, the Washington Huskies. Same thing with Penn State. Are they as for real as they appeared last year, or was that just an outlier season? They've got a QB coming back in Jake Browning. They've got Myles Gaskin returning at running back. They got a few defensive starters coming back from last year as well. But Washington has an easy schedule, in my opinion. With Washington's schedule, they should probably at least easily start off 7-0 this year. I'll be surprised if they lose any of their first 7 games. Number 9, the Wisconsin Badgers. Now, Wisconsin's always a team that's going to be up there, top 10, top 15. But Wisconsin's really consistent, especially over this past decade. But the problem I have with Wisconsin is their quarterback play in Alex Warnerbrook. I think all eyes will be on him. But I think Wisconsin will still be a major contender for the Big Ten championship. Number 10, Oklahoma State. Now, Oklahoma State's got they got a Heisman hopeful as well. I wouldn't call Mason Rudolph a Heisman hopeful, but he's considered a Heisman hopeful. Honestly, the best quarterback play is going to come from the Pac-12 and the Big 12 conference. They're going to come from those 2 conferences. But Oklahoma State, I think they're the fool's gold team. They're a team that they're going to be really good. But then when it matters, they're just going to choke it away. That's been Oklahoma State the last few years. And this year I see no different from Oklahoma State. So I'm surprised they're even in the top 10. That's the first thing that I don't like about this AP preseason poll. Number 11, Michigan. Now I'm surprised Michigan's even in the top 15. considering all that they lost going into the NFL last year. But they still have a quarterback in Wilton Speight. But although Jim Harbaugh was saying that he wasn't the definite starter, but I feel like Wilton Speight has to be the starter if Michigan's going to have any success this season. And they already have a huge test in Week 1 against Florida. Number 12, the Auburn Tigers. Now, I'm kind of surprised I think Auburn's a little bit too high. I mean, I remember 2 years ago when they almost lost to Jacksonville State in Week 2. I feel like Auburn's kind of overrated. But we'll know what Auburn is really made of in Week 2 when they play against Clemson. Number 13, the LSU Tigers. Now, LSU is another team with inconsistency. I mean, if we're gonna predict LSU season, it's gonna probably go like this. They're gonna start off really well. They're probably gonna be undefeated going into Alabama, the Alabama game, and they're probably gonna get walloped 38-14. That's what's happened the last 3-4 years. And honestly, we should see no different for that, because LSU lacks quarterback play. Time and time again, it's been proved that Alabama is LSU's kryptonite. So LSU will not win the national championship. Number 14, the Stanford Cardinals. Now, Stanford had a really bad season last year. Well, I wouldn't say bad, but it wasn't Stanford standards throughout this decade. Now, it's going to be interesting to watch Stanford. And don't forget that they're one of the teams that play on Saturday against Rice. It's going to be interesting how Stanford is going to be in the post-Christian McCaffrey era. Number 15, the Georgia Bulldogs. Now, I can understand why Georgia's probably 15. I mean, you got a quarterback coming back in Jacob Eason, who's now more experienced, Heisman hopeful in Nick Chubb, who's probably going to be the second or third running back taken in the 2018 NFL Draft. Number 16, Louisville. Now, some would say Louisville's ranked too low. They're bringing Heisman winner Lamar Jackson. But watch the last 3 games of the season, and I'm including the bowl game against LSU. Louisville just imploded at the end of the season, with losses to Houston and Kentucky, and a humiliating loss to LSU in the bowl game. I feel like Louisville should be right where they're at 16. Number 17, the Florida Gators. Now, Florida has had no problem reaching the SEC championship game, but have gotten demolished by Alabama. Now, Florida is already going to have some question marks, considering in the opener, they will be missing 7 players, including star wide receiver Antonio Callaway. So that's going to be a major thing to watch out for, because I feel like Florida is going to be really missing Antonio Callaway in that Michigan game. Number 18, Miami, Florida. Now, I'm not buying into Miami, Florida either. I just can't buy into these Hurricanes. I mean, Mark Richt is a great coach and all, but Miami just hasn't done anything productive in football ever since the heartbreaking loss against Ohio State in the national championship game. Like, nothing productive has come out of this Miami, Florida football team. Number 19, South Florida. Now, this is the surprise team of the year. But although you gotta feel bad for South Florida, I mean, South Florida's got a pretty easy schedule this year. And if you look at it, their toughest game of the year is against Houston. So South Florida could probably easily go 12-0 or 11-1. But even if they do go 12-0 and they end up going like soaring all the way to number like 4 in the country or in the playoff standings, they won't even make the college football playoff. That's kind of sad. This is why we need the college football playoff to extend to 8 teams. Because of teams like South Florida. Number 20, Kansas State. Now, some are probably going to have... some eyebrows are raised on why Kansas State is ranked number 20. But here's the thing. They've got a solid amount of starters returning. And I think they might be the Big 12 team that... I think there'll be a Cinderella team in the Big 12. Number 20, Virginia Tech. Now, it's going to be interesting what happens with Virginia Tech this year after the departure of Gerard Evans. So it's going to be interesting to watch them be a quarterback battle Virginia Tech. But they could make it back to the ACC championship game again. Because the ACC... because their side of the ACC conference is just so weak, they should probably get back there without any problem. 22, West Virginia. Will Grier quarterback's going to be a really huge upgrade for West Virginia. I feel like it's going to work out for a bit, but I don't see West Virginia doing any better than 8-4. If they do any better than 8-4, I'm going to be really surprised. Number 23, the Texas Longhorns. Now, this is what I don't understand. At first, I couldn't understand why Texas would be ranked number 23, despite going 5-7 last year. What I think the AP was trying to do is they were trying to get it into our minds that they now have Tom Herman as head coach. And they believe that Tom Herman is going to change the landscape of Texas. And Texas is going to get their first real test against USC in Week 3. I feel like that Week 3 game against USC is going to make or break the Texas season. But mark my words, if Texas gets blown up by USC in Week 3, they're going at best 6-6. If they beat USC, they'll go 9-3. Mark my words. Now, 24, Washington State. Now, Washington had a pretty decent season last year, but kind of again, the Pac-12 was weak last year. Oregon struggled. Stanford struggled. But Washington State had an opportunity to win the Pac-12, but they got blown out by Washington to get in there. Number 25, Tennessee. Kind of the same thing. Although we are going to see it's going to be interesting to see Tennessee on Labor Day night against Georgia Tech. Can that defense stop the triple option? Or, in a sense, can an SEC defense stop the triple option? That's going to be the main point in that game. And plus, Tennessee with the post-Joshua Dobbs era. It's going to be interesting to see how they come out. And I think Tennessee is overhyped again, as usual. Because Tennessee gets overhyped every single year. Honestly, teams get overhyped as well all the time. Tennessee gets overhyped. Texas gets overhyped. USC gets overhyped. Nebraska gets overhyped. I'll admit it, Texas A&M gets overhyped every single year. So anyway, that's my reaction to the AP Top 25. Now for the next 2 minutes, if anybody wants, we'll do a quick Q&A. I'll give everybody about 30 seconds to enter in their questions, and I'll answer a couple. Alright, we've got Amped Gaming. Who do you think will surprise us the most within the top 25? Honestly, I think there's going to be a couple that will surprise us. It's going to be whether how bad they do or how good they do. I think Kansas State will surprise us in either a good or a bad way. But I'm thinking it might be a little bit more good, considering that Kansas State's got Jesse Ertz at quarterback, who now has more experience, and he's returning for another season. Plus, they got a speed wide receiver in Byron Pringle. There's just something I like about Kansas State this year. I don't know if it's the possibility of Bill Snyder's last year as the head coach for hanging it up, but I think there's just something brewing in Kansas State right now. I also think South Florida is going to probably surprise us a bit. Like I said, South Florida can easily go 12-0. I think their most challenging game of the year is probably going to be against Houston. Maybe on the road at Connecticut, but I don't see them having a problem with that one. Amped Gaming also asked, what teams that are unranked do you think will get ranked? This is kind of a popular one. I'm thinking Northwestern. Senior leadership coming back. And running back Justin Jackson's coming back for a senior season. QB play is now experienced. I'm thinking Northwestern might be this year's Penn State. I know it's kind of a bit of a far stretch, but I feel like they can easily probably win at least maybe 10 games. Whatever to Watch asks, do you think Florida State is a top 3 team? To be honest, I think the only reason why the Associated Press wanted to put Florida State in the top 3, because I would put Florida State more of maybe a bit outside the top 5. But last year, Florida State didn't really prove to be a top 3 team to me. If you just look at the games Florida State lost, they got humiliated by Louisville. What was the score of that game? Like 62-20? That doesn't prove they're a top 3 team at all. You lose on a last-second field goal to North Carolina. The Clemson game, they kind of got ripped off a bit. I believe it was like a holding call or something like that. But I don't think Florida State necessarily did enough to prove they're deserving of a top 3 team. Because top 3 teams don't lose 62-20. I think the only reason why the Associated Press probably put Florida State at number 3, I just feel like maybe like the NCAA was maybe trying to talk them into putting Florida. I'm just making a conspiracy theory. I'm thinking Florida State's only in the top 3 because the NCAA, like executives inside the NCAA, just wanted to build up Alabama and Florida State. Because if history even shows it, Alabama's going to blow out Florida State. And I'm thinking after that week 1 game against Alabama, I feel like we're going to prove that Florida State is not a top 3 team. And I know that they have DeAndre Francois coming back at quarterback with a full season of experience under his belt. But not a team's not being made up by a quarterback. The Florida State's defense is pretty decent, but I don't think it's going to be enough to stop Alabama. In fact, Alabama feasts off exposing teams. Like, Alabama may start off slow, like in the first quarter, but when it gets to the second half, the fourth quarter, they just expose you. So no, I don't feel like Florida State deserved to be a top 3 team. In fact, I would probably put Clemson at number 3 or USC at 3, despite me thinking that USC is getting overhyped this year, despite having a kind of a comeback year last year after starting off 1-3. Either that or there was just nowhere to put any other teams. It's either for that reason or the reason or the little conspiracy theory I just mentioned. Because if Alabama beats Florida State 52-6, like they beat up on USC last year, we'll know that was just to build up that matchup. Global sports commentator, who do you think will win the national championship? Honestly, the favorite's going to be Alabama every single year. But I think there's maybe a few teams that could beat Alabama, though. But I don't think it's going to be Florida State. I don't think it's going to be... It could be Florida State, maybe like in the playoff. Like maybe if we saw an 8-team playoff, maybe USC could have beaten Alabama a second time. Or the second time around. Because the 52-6 loss, that was before Sam Darnold even took over a quarterback. That's another reason why I feel like we should extend the playoffs to 8 teams. Because a lot of teams get punished for losing one game. Especially like if they lose it in like a heartbreaking fashion, like a missed field goal or a bad call by the officials. But I think the only team on the schedule that has a chance of beating Alabama is Florida State. Maybe Ohio State has a chance of beating Alabama, but that'd have to be in the national championship game. But right now, I would say Alabama will win the national championship. Global sports commentator, which team needs to make a coaching change? I can name several ones. Texas A&M. Arizona State. I would say maybe Notre Dame with Brian Kelly, but there's a possibility he'll leave for the NFL if an NFL coaching job opens up. Let's see, who else? I'm thinking Tennessee needs to make a coaching change. Let's see, I am thinking that Kansas State will need to make a coaching change at some point because Bill Snyder is going to retire eventually. I don't think he's just going to go out and die coaching like Joe Paterno did. I just can't see that happening. Whatever to watch is Northwestern will win 9+ games. I think that'd be a good statement to bet on. Especially with the Big Ten kind of getting a bit weaker as it stands. But I know there's Ohio State, Michigan, and Wisconsin. But Michigan State, Nebraska, Iowa, they've just fallen off the wheels a bit. So Northwestern could easily win 9 games. Either that or they'll just go 7-5 like usual. But Northwestern will make a bowl game. Whatever watches, do you think Georgia gets the SEC championship? Honestly, that game against Florida, like every single year, that's going to determine who plays Alabama in the SEC championship game and probably gets beaten up 52-13. I mean, you just got to be realistic here. The Brandon Schumack, as a Penn State fan, what are the chances of making the playoffs? I'm not sure if you were here earlier when I was kind of reading them off. But I was saying that if Penn State beats Ohio State, let me just say this. The Ohio State-Penn State game, or the Ohio State game for Penn State, going on the road in the Horseshoe, it's probably going to be in prime time. I don't know if there's like a set time on that. But if there's not, they're going to make it prime time. Because it might most likely be, it could easily be a top 5, top 10 matchup. Kind of for build-up purposes. But that's going to, I feel like that Ohio State or Penn State will determine whether they're in or out of the College Football Playoff. But of course, they'd also have to win the Big Ten championship game. But last year they proved they can do it, especially coming back from being 21 down to beat Wisconsin. Whoever to watch is Georgia can't compete with Bama. But the last time it happened, they didn't really, though. That's the problem I have with Georgia. I feel like the SEC is just kind of getting weaker than it was in years past. Whatever to watch. We lost last time because of garbage disposal QE play. The defense didn't play that bad. But I thought the defense gave up 38 points. Anyway, I'm gonna give about 30 more seconds for any last second questions. I've got to because I've got to run. So 30 seconds for any last minute questions that I will answer. Yeah, whatever to watch. Like, it's hard for me to remember like college football from like 3 years in the past. Because I think that's the last time I played was probably 3 years ago. Okay, that's when it was, 2015. Yeah, because I can only remember games from probably last year. Anyway, that is all I have for you today. Like, subscribe if you haven't already. Share this video with your friends and your family. I will see you next time. Have a wonderful day, everyone.